Beneath all curious customs and beliefs, deeper than ecclesiastical creeds, more vital and basic than priestly rites, stands one impressive fact. Man and woman touch infinity. Our home is an immensity. We live, move, and have our being in an eternity. This magnificent assertion is our greatest affirmation. I am the Reverend Dr. Anthony Johnson, and I welcome you to this virtual worship service of the Unitarian Church of Harrisburg. Although we cannot meet in the church building due to the COVID pandemic, there is a full schedule of programs and activities. Every Sunday, there is a live virtual coffee hour following the service, beginning at 11:30 a.m. Today, there will also be a ministerial search committee charrette beginning at 11:45 a.m. Please read news you can use and other emails you receive from the church, and please check the website regularly for updates. Please send your joy or sorrow via the link in the email you received and indicate whether you give permission for it to be read in the following Sunday's service. I especially welcome this morning as our guest preacher, the Reverend Rob Keithan, and as our lay liturgist, Nan Kavanaugh. If you are a visitor or newcomer, I invite you to explore the website uchbg.org to learn more about the church and its many activities. Whoever you are, wherever you live, whomever you love, whatever you do for a living, you are welcome at the Unitarian Church of Harrisburg.
I invite you at home to light a chalice, a candle, or whatever you choose to serve as your chalice at home. May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our powers to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse, to serve you, Spirit of freedom. Please join in the reading of the Unison Affirmation. Love is the spirit of this congregation, and service is our gift. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to speak our truths in love, and to help one another.
This is my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for land afar and mine. This is my home, the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine. But other hearts in other lands are beating with hopes and dreams as true and high as mine. My country's skies are bluer than the ocean, and sunlight beams on clover leaf and pine. But other lands have sunlight too, and clover, and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. Oh, hear my song, thou God of all the nations, a song of peace for their land and for mine.
Hello, my name is Corey, and I serve as your Director of Religious Exploration. Today, I'm going to share with you an Ethiopian tale titled Fire, Water, Truth, and Falsehood. Okay, long ago, fire, water, truth, and falsehood lived together in one large house. Although all were polite toward each other, they kept their distance. Truth and falsehood sat on opposite sides of the room. Fire constantly leapt out of water's path. One day they were hunting together. They found a large number of cattle and began driving them home to their village. "Let us all share these cattle equally," said Truth, as they traveled across the grasslands. "This is the fair way to divide our captives." No one disagreed with Truth except Falsehood. Falsehood wanted more than an equal share, but kept quiet about it for the moment. As the 4 hunters traveled back to the village, Falsehood went secretly to Water and whispered, "You are more powerful than fire. Destroy fire, and then there will be more cattle for each of us." Water flowed over fire, bubbling and streaming until fire was gone. Water meandered along, cheerfully thinking about more cattle for itself. Falsehood, meanwhile, whispered to Truth, "Look, see for yourself. Water has killed fire. Let us leave Water, who has cruelly destroyed our warm-hearted friend. We must take the cattle high in the mountain to graze." As Truth and Falsehood traveled up the mountain, Water tried to follow, but the mountain was too steep, and Water could not flow upwards. Water washed down upon itself, splashing and swirling around rocks as it tumbled down the slopes. Look and see, Water is still tumbling down the mountainside to this day. Truth and Falsehood arrived at the mountaintop. Falsehood turned to Truth and said in a loud voice, "I am more powerful than you. You will be my servant. I am your master. All the cattle belong to me." Truth rose up and spoke out, "I will not be your servant." They battled, and finally they brought the argument to Wind to decide who was master. Well, Wind didn't know. Wind blew all over the world to ask people whether Truth or Falsehood was more powerful. Some people said a single word of falsehood can completely destroy truth. Others insisted, like a small candle in the dark, truth can change every situation. Wind finally returned to the mountain and said, "I have seen that falsehood is very powerful, but it can rule only when truth has stopped struggling to be heard." And it has been that way ever since.
Please enter into the spirit of prayer and meditation. A meditation reflecting upon the opening words. Man and woman touch infinity. Creatures on this planet, we reach above and beyond what we know. We invent devices that enable us to see far beyond our physical reach and imagine even more. Our home is an immensity. We are small in the scale of the universe. We live in a reality so large that it challenges us to be larger than we are. We live, move, and have our being in an eternity. Though our lifespans are brief in the eons of existence, we know this reality, acknowledge it, and seek to understand it. We live and move so that it matters. However short or long our reach is in time or space, however much or little of eternity we can experience. What we do, what we know, how we live matters. Amen. Blessed be.
Our reading this morning is On Compassion by the Dalai Lama. Let me explain what we mean by compassion. Usually, our concept of compassion or love refers to the feeling of closeness we have with our friends and loved ones. Sometimes compassion also carries a sense of pity. This is wrong. Any love or compassion which entails looking down on the other is not genuine compassion. To be genuine, compassion must be based on respect for the other and on the realization that others have the right to be happy and overcome suffering just as much as you. On this basis, since you can see that others are suffering, you develop a genuine sense of concern for them. This is Reverend Rob's professional introduction. Reverend Rob Keithan is the Minister of Social Justice at All Souls Church Unitarian in Washington, D.C. He also serves as a consultant, specializing in counter-oppressive transformation, congregational social justice programs, and long-term culture change related to reproductive health, rights, and justice. Recent clients include the Center for American Progress and the Planned Parenthood Federation of America. Previously, Reverend Keithan served as director of the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations, Washington office. He lives with his wife and their two beautiful daughters in Washington, D.C. This is the mom-inspired introduction. Rob Kavanaugh Keithan is the son of Jim and Ann Kavanaugh, and he was attending the Unitarian Church of Harrisburg before he was born. A lifelong UU, Rob has had the benefit of this community and its people, from childcare in the nursery to a full range of RE programs. He was an enthusiastic participant in youth activities that led to an internship in the UUA office in Boston during his college years. When Jim and I attended the UU General Assembly in Indianapolis, we heard him speak the chalice lighting to an audience of 1,000 UUs. And he said, "I am Rob Kavanaugh, and I am going to change the world." Yes, this community can be proud and happy to welcome Rob to our pulpit.
Hello, I am so honored to be your guest preacher today. Now, always be grateful to the Unitarian Church of Harrisburg because you are the congregation that raised me. And I'm thankful for my parents too, Jim and Ann Kavanaugh, who in addition to being great parents, helped me in the context of this community and this congregation find a faith that worked for me and eventually become a Unitarian Universalist minister. And so again, it's great to be able to share worship leadership with my mom today, and I hope to be with you at some point in person in the near future. So I go to All Souls Church, where I serve, a few times a week to open up the building for the mutual aid effort we host in our otherwise unused social hall. And I typically use it as an opportunity to get some work done and print things on the big church printer, which is located down a corridor from the social hall. I tried to print something there a few weeks ago, and when I got to the printer, I found that nothing had happened. As I moved towards being able to read the display, I was really hoping that it would say something that was easy to fix, like that it was out of paper. But I was emotionally and preparing myself to need to open like 7 doors and 8 flaps in a precise manner that probably wasn't going to fix the problem anyway. When I read the display, though, there was an unexpected message that I'd never seen before. It said, "Printer is in an error state." And for whatever reason, it just filled me with sympathy. And I thought, and I'm pretty sure I actually said out loud, "Oh, aren't we all?" Because seriously, there are so many things about our lives and our world that are in an error state right now. Some of them are new, but some of them are not. And that's the great paradox of our country. The United States was founded on the principles of both freedom and domination. We've always been both an error state and more. And this contrast, this paradox is the subject of Langston Hughes' brilliant poem, "Let America Be America Again." It's one of my favorite poems of all time because it is such a powerful critique of the nation's problems, coupled with a fierce dedication to the vision and the possibility of being better. And it's a phenomenal embodiment of how I understand patriotism. In the first 4 lines, he describes the dream that never was accessible to him. He writes, "Let America be America again. Let it be the dream it used to be. Let it be the pioneer on the plain, seeking a home where himself is free. America never was America to me." A few stanzas later, in contrast to this pioneering colonialism and individualism, he writes, "Say, who are you that mumbles in the dark? And who are you that draws your veil across the stars? I am the poor white, fooled and pushed apart. I am the Negro bearing slavery's scars. I am the red man driven from the land. I am the immigrant clutching the hope I seek and finding only the same old stupid plan of dog eat dog, of mighty crush the weak." The struggle between these two Americas, the America of liberation and the America of domination, is present throughout our institutions and politics and culture today. The original question I was going to reflect on in this sermon was, how do we feel about the country? But I want to get more specific, more tangible. And so instead I'm focusing on, how do we feel about people whose views we disagree with? Because ultimately that's the tension we're in right now, and not just in this election related to differences in candidates or parties. I'm talking about the differences of opinion on issues and values and entire worldviews. I'm reminded of the semester in college that I spent studying conflict. I found myself less interested in the conflicts between significantly different nations or people, like between Russia and the United States, and more so in conflicts in communities that otherwise had a lot in common, like Catholics and Protestants in the UK, or Sunni and Shia Muslims in the Middle East. And when I'm thinking of this kind of conflict, I'm often reminded of an experience I had driving across the United States to Portland, Oregon, in 2008 for my ministerial internship. My friend and I had stopped for gas in Greer, Idaho, population 3,100. Now, Greer is 3.5 hours west of Missoula, Montana, surrounded by forest. And as we stood filling up the car, we heard some teenagers talking about the people in the next town over, Orofino, which also has a population of 3,100. To summarize and paraphrase the content of their conversation, their basic point was, all the people in Orofino were so dumb. It took some restraint, but I did resist the urge to ask them why they thought that, given that the people of Orofino were probably more similar to them than 99.9% of the rest of the entire world. In the end, both my studies and my personal experiences lead me to agree with scholars like Jonathan Haidt, who say that our brains are, at least to some degree, hardwired towards tribalism. This year in the United States, our divisions are perhaps more obvious and more raw than any time in our recent history. And so it's understandable that we have some very strong and frequently very negative feelings about people with different beliefs than ours. At the same time, our faith calls us to work for justice, which involves changing people's minds on issues, which requires having disagreements with people about our different beliefs. And so the question this poses is, how do we do our justice work, which absolutely needs to be done, without reinforcing our tendency to dislike and demonize other groups and other people? And again, I want to keep the focus as tangible as possible. So I'm not considering our views about public figures or complete strangers. I want to talk about what it looks like to have compassion and respect for people we already know with whom we disagree. Neighbors, coworkers, friends, and the final frontier, family. And I'm not trying to offer a one-size-fits-all solution because there isn't one. I'm just trying to offer a perspective that I think can be helpful in some situations, both for making real change, but also for our own mental and spiritual health. Especially given our levels of stress and fatigue from the coronavirus, self-care is incredibly important. And especially for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and people with low incomes who are bearing the burden of impact more than the rest of us. And the self-care piece is tough because many of us with a wide range of identities passionately and forcefully want our nation to be a better place. And this kind of passion is important and necessary. And there are times when it's simply not as effective or as sustainable as other approaches. And so allow me to introduce another paradox, as explained by Dr. David Camp. Dr. Camp, an African-American scholar and activist, is best known for his White Ally Toolkit, but he also works on how liberal and progressive people can connect with voters who hold different views, or people who tend not to vote. All Souls teamed up with the First Unitarian Church of Portland, Oregon, to support Dr. Camp leading online versions of his courses on voting, as well as recording versions that are now available for free on his website. And just so you know, there are two courses about mobilizing non-voters, one for general audiences and one that is specifically focused on people of color talking to each other. And there are two courses about fostering dialogue about ideological divides, one specifically about finding common ground, and one is about being persuasive. And we'll share the link with you. I took his course on mobilizing non-voters and want to give you just a taste of it. All his courses draw on the fundamental value and practice of compassion, so it's applicable to many situations. And returning to that theme of paradox, his course started with what Dr. Camp describes as a paradox of trying to influence people. And the paradox is tied to a human response called reactance. When someone wants to change, or when someone else wants to change us, most of us have a built-in opposition. That's reactance. And so our goal is to work with someone in a way that doesn't trigger reactance. And the metaphor Dr. Camp offers is that it's like trying to catch a butterfly. If you react too fast, the wind blows it away. I'll offer another metaphor. It's like trying to get a toddler to do something quickly. The more you're in a hurry, the more they will try to do any other thing besides what you want them to do. Anyway, here are Dr. Camp's own words about both the political and personal benefits of the approach he recommends. He writes, "In a world that is demonstrating an insufficient degree of compassion, it is vital that people of conscience look at their relationships with friends, family, and acquaintances as important arenas to both exhibit compassion and to encourage it. The polarization in society has made many people of compassion afraid to have conversations with others, regardless of the salience of politics to our daily lives. Many of us can only imagine unpleasant arguments that tend to tear down relationships. As a result," he writes, "our relationships are less authentic since we cannot have conversations about some important things we care about. In addition, the friends and families who may not value compassion as much as we do never get to hear about our perspective, how our values affect our concerns on public issues, and thus we undermine our own social change goals because we are afraid to engage those closest to us." This is one of the things that attracted me most about his work, and after his training, I'm even further convinced of its value. That his approach has clear public benefits, yes, but also clear personal benefits. Now, justice work requires both the skills of a sprinter and the skills of a marathoner. Right now, Unitarian Universalists all across the country are working together more closely than ever under the banner of UU the Vote. We are in full sprint mode. Our closing hymn in this service, "We Shall Be Known," was created by All Souls Music Ministry for the UU the Vote campaign. This said, if we focus too much on the skill of sprinting, we fail. Because regardless of who wins the presidential election, we're still going to have a deeply divided country where institutional racism and institutional oppression run deep. And so it really matters that we have skills for making connections across differences. Elections can be won by running a successful campaign, but lasting social transformation requires building a movement. It requires slow and sustainable change that happens over time. And this happens over multiple conversations in relationships that endure. The silver lining in recognizing this is that we can give ourselves permission to dial back our expectations, both of how fast others will change and how fast we can change them. Expecting people to change their minds quickly on deeply held beliefs sets up a scenario where everyone loses. In the training with Dr. Camp, we did a few role-playing exercises. At least twice, he pointed out that I had moved too quickly to trying to change the person's behavior before I had established trust with them based on genuine compassion and connection. And he was totally right. I'm a very outcome-oriented person by nature, and these times only increase that tendency. It works fine in some situations, but not when the goal is genuine relationship or compassion. I fell into the trap of reaching too fast for the butterfly, and I needed to slow down, way down. And the truth is, I needed to realize that feeling a genuine sense of compassion for someone could not just be a box to mindlessly check while I was headed towards the real goal. The reason to focus on genuine compassion isn't just so that we can be more effective politically. Dr. Camp says, learning to do so will be good for our own spiritual health. Shifting to compassion-based dialogue methods will require us stretching ourselves. We will need to learn important skills, such as calming our spirits, purposely ginning up our compassion even though we might disagree, seeing other people with opposing views as fundamentally equal to us, and putting aside the ego, telling us that we are deep down superior. That's another key piece of the work, the spiritual work, that this process invites us and requires us to do. Acknowledging and managing our own sense of superiority in these interactions. And that's a bit of a paradox as well. The reason we have our beliefs is that we think they are better than the alternatives. If I'm talking to a white friend who isn't invested in ending racism, or I'm talking to a guy who isn't conscious of his own sexism, I definitely want to change them because I think racial justice and gender justice are better. And I think Camp would agree and say that we absolutely should hold to our beliefs. It's not an either or, it's both and. To be effective and to be in a better place spiritually, we have to hold our beliefs and be able to find genuine compassion for the people we're talking to. One way to do this, especially right now, is to remember that basically everyone, like my friend the printer, is in an error state to some degree. Another way is to get creative, to find little practices or phrases that help you avoid judgment. The Southern phrase, well, bless their heart, is perfectly suited for this purpose, I think. It's a great paradox asset because it allows you to say a little and a lot all at the same time. For example, if you couldn't think of anything positive to say about President Trump having the coronavirus, that would be a great time to just say, well, bless his heart. Yes, the struggle for liberation requires outrage and courage and speaking truth to power. But it also requires humor and resilience and compassion. Because only in the fullness of who we are, only with a movement that is both broad and deep, can we fulfill the liberating vision of our nation. It's the vision expressed in these closing words by Langston Hughes, which are as much poetry as they are prayer. Oh, let America be America again, the land that never has been yet, and yet must be, the land where everyone is free. Amen.
Even as you are separated and sitting in your own homes today, Unitarian Church of Harrisburg is nevertheless a freely gathered church of free people. The church is created, sustained, and supported by you, the people. The church is open, even when the building is closed. Each week, we donate our offering to a community organization. During the month of October, the recipient is Gather the Spirit for Justice. Gather the Spirit for Justice is a nonprofit 501c3 organization that brings together Allison Hill residents, area organizations, businesses, and churches to address issues of social justice and economic equity. It was jointly founded by the Unitarian Church of Harrisburg and the shared ministry during the time we operated at 1508 Market Street. It now operates out of Christ Lutheran Church, 124 South 13th Street. Gather the Spirit strives to be a place where people can find common ground to meet and discuss the changes that need to be made to make Harrisburg a great place to live for all its citizens.
Let those who live in every land declare that fear and war are done, joined by the labor of their hands in love and understanding one.
This is an all-hands-on-deck moment for our democracy. In addition to the courses that I recommended by Dr. David Camp, the You the Vote campaign has events nearly every single day from now through November 3rd. In fact, there's a You the Vote Pennsylvania phone bank today from 1:30 to 4:30. Each of the events starts with a training, and it's strictly nonpartisan, which means that folks are actually more willing to talk to you than if you were doing calls for a partisan campaign. And most importantly, this kind of nonprofit, nonpartisan phone banking and text banking works. And so I encourage you to do at least one, if not more, voter mobilization actions between now and November 3rd. It will feel good, and you'll be making a difference for our democracy.
We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now, it is time now that we cry, it is time we lead ourselves into the way. Turning, we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now, it is time now that we thrive, it is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love.
This country has always been right and wrong, and always will be. So it goes with us. We are imperfect beings. And so let us commit to genuine compassion. May it be a healing balm to us and to our world. Amen.